What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Road series here at Foundations of Faith. We're talking about the road to Jesus. What do we got to do to get there? What do we have to stop to get there? Today, we're going to be talking about speed limit. So we like to go fast. It's in our human nature. We love to push boundaries. We love to see how far we can go. We love to see how fast we can go. So typically when we think of following the speed limit, we think of driving, obviously. There's a sign on the side of the road that says, hey, there's a speed limit. You need to follow it. We think of those white signs with the black numbers, the big black numbers that say 35 or 45 or 55. Sometimes, in other places they have different colored signs. They have different color or numbers. They have different types of measurement. But we know what these signs look like. We know that they're on the side of the road and they are there to tell us, hey, you can only drive this fast. Don't go over. There's a chance you might get pulled over. And sometimes we dread these signs, like when we see a cop and we're going 50 in a 35. That's personal experience. Trust me. Personal experience. We dread those signs. But sometimes we do not mean to cross those lines. We do not mean to go over this speed limit. We accidentally push the gas too hard, or we're not paying attention to how fast we're going, and we either end up getting pulled over, or we look down and go, oh shoot, I'm going 10 over, I'm going 12 over. Other times, we purposely push back or push the gas a little extra. We push it a little extra hard in hopes to get a little bit faster than the rest of the people around us to get where we're going faster. You see, we want to get where we want to go, and we want to get there fast. We don't like to spend time in traffic. We don't like to spend time that we deem as wasted going slower than what we could be going. We ignore those speed limits because we want to go faster than what is necessary or than what is assigned to us. And the same can be said about our spiritual life. God places speed limits in our lives for a reason. And obviously he doesn't place a big white sign in the middle of our lives that says, hey, go 75 miles an hour. But he has a speed limit for our lives. He wants us to follow his will for our lives, not our own. He doesn't want us to try and push our own agenda. You see, when we try to push that speed limit, we're trying to take control out of God's hands. We're trying to place that control into our own hands in order to facilitate whatever we're trying to do, in order to get to where we want to go. But that's not what we're called to do. That's not what God has called us to do. We are called and encouraged to give it to God. We have to give our control to God. We have to let him lead us and guide us at his pace rather than our own pace, because if it was up to us, we'd already be in Narnia by now. We are told to be still in those times where we want to push the foot on the gas. Be still. And sometimes it may seem like we need to go faster. I know in my life, over and over again, I've wanted to push that gas before God wanted me to. But God tells us that we have to go the speed limit that he has set forth for us. We have to be still and wait on him. And that's actually what we're going to be in today. We're going to read in Psalm 46:10, and it says this, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations, and I will be exalted in the earth. So it's important to understand the context of this psalm. David wrote this psalm. If you've been watching this channel, you're understanding a pattern. We love Davidic psalms. So David wrote this psalm, and he's telling us about who God is. He's telling us that he is our fortress, and he's telling us that he will keep us safe. He's declaring God as our fortress and as our refuge. He's telling of God's power and what he can do. Because of that power, we should be still and we should know that he is God. We should know that he controls our lives and he controls our steps. He controls every single aspect of our life. He understands us and he generates his will in order for us to succeed through that will, in order for us to come to him. So we have to stop trying to control what God has already mapped out for us. We have to stop trying to control every little aspect of our lives. We have to rely on him to make a way into work, because we can't make the same ways and we can't work the same that God does. God's a miracle maker. We have to rely on him to make a way into work. We cannot, and this is the first point, we cannot push the issue in order to get what we want when we want it. We cannot push the issue in order to get what we want when we want it. We have to be patient when following God's path. We have to follow the speed limits that are along that path. We have to be patient. We cannot push the issue, because pushing the issue only makes us be more and more in need of control. But when we're not pushing that issue and we're following those speed limits that God has set forth for us, we're letting him control our lives and we're letting him facilitate our actions. And that's what we are called to do. Because if we try to push the issue and we try to push past that speed limit that God has instituted, then we will miss what he has for us. I'm going to say that again. If we try to push past the issue and push past the speed limit that God has instituted, we miss what God has for us. We miss everything that he wants us to see. We miss the lessons that he has that he wants us to learn. Because believe it or not, and trust me, it took a long time for me to understand this, sometimes the lessons are hidden in the waiting seasons. They're hidden in the slow seasons of life where it feels like the speed limit is 20 miles an hour, yet you want to go 40. They're hidden in the slow seasons, in the waiting seasons. And these waiting seasons are used in order for us to grow closer to God and closer in dependence to God, for us to depend on God and understand, hey, it might be going slow right now, but I promise you I'm going to take you to where you need to be. It's kind of like what we talked about with the detour, how it makes it longer, but yet it's exactly where you need to be. Same thing goes here. Follow the speed limit because it's used to grow closer and closer to God. And if we neglect those seasons and we try to go faster than what God wants us to go and what God has instituted, we will end up missing those chances that we have to grow. We will miss them because we're so focused on going faster than whatever that white sign is telling us that we end up missing what God has for us. And if we keep missing the chances or neglecting those chances to know God and to understand God and to grow with God, then obviously we will never be able to grow closer to him. We will never be able to foster a healthy relationship with him and know exactly what his will is for us because we're not drawing close to him. We're also not obeying the speed limit that he has set forth for us. We will always be pushing his will to the side in exchange for our own wants and needs and desires and our own will that we think we know best, because we are humans and we love to think that we know better than everybody else. Isn't that right, JB? JB shook his head. We will always be going faster than that speed limit because we want to get where we want to go rather than where God wants us. Rather than where God says that we will be safe at, rather than where God says that, hey, I want you to go here. I want you to take a pit stop at this rest station. I want you to do this. No, I'm just going to keep going 70. There's a problem here. There's a problem here, and it's a disobedience problem. It's a disobedience and a control problem on the part of the human race because we love to do what we want to do and we love to get where we're going and we love to do it fast. But in reality, we have to trust where God is going. We have to trust where God is leading us and what he is doing in our lives. He's the all-powerful God. He is the all-powerful fortress. He can move mountains. He is our refuge and our strength. He is our hiding place. He is everything that we will ever need in this life. Yet we still want to push past that speed limit. We still want to go faster than what God wants us to go. We still want to pull further and further away from him because it's not what we want. It's not what we don't comprehend this, that we need God to live. God is life. Jesus is life, as it says in 1 John 5. Jesus is life, yet we can't see that because we're so focused on what we want and going fast to get where we want to go. We don't see the minor details of life that God wants us to see because we're so focused on getting to the destination that we don't care about the speed limit on the side of the road. We don't care. But yet he is our refuge and our strength, like I said in verse 1. He's our fortress, as it says in verse 7. He is with us and he is guiding us. We have to obey that speed limit that he has put forth for us. We have to. There's times in my life where I've pushed past the breaking point, where I've pushed the limits. I've wanted things that God have told me they were not for me. Yet I still pushed for them, and I still went faster in order to achieve them. And that's after the call to ministry. Don't even get me started on before. They not only pulled me further and further away from God, but they made me think that I could do it myself. At the very beginning of my ministry journey, oh, I can get this job. I just got to go. Oh, I can do this. I just got to go. Oh, I understand this theological principle. I just got to go. I wasn't relying on God to show me where he wanted me and what he wanted me to know. I was pushing that speed limit because I wanted to, not because God was telling me to. That speed limit's there for a reason, and I hope you understand that. It's also important to understand that sometimes we can push the speed limit of things that were meant for us on accident. It's not just about pushing things that God has not planned for us. You know, some of these things God has planned for us. We know that, but we want it now, so we go for it. We try and go for it faster than what God wants us to go. You see, it can be a job that God is leading us to. Like in my case, where I thought I was being called somewhere, but God was really telling me to wait. Still hard to do that. It could be something else along those lines. You see, we miss the journey when we push so hard to get to the destination. A lot of people take, and this goes for anything, this goes outside of spiritual too. A lot of people want to get to this is hiking wise, they want to get to the top of the mountain first. They want to get to the top of the mountain, so they'll trudge through the whole peak. They'll get to the peak faster than what, probably people say they should, and they miss the whole journey around them. On a car ride, you want to get to the destination as fast as possible. And I guess that's acceptable. I don't want to sit in a car for 12 hours. But you miss the area around you. You miss the sightseeing around you if you're going fast. If you're going faster than what you're supposed to. We don't take advantage of the scenery. We don't take advantage of the journey because we're so focused on the destination. We have to be focused on the destination or the journey because the destination is only one part of it. And like we talked about last week, the road trip, the destination's only one part. The journey's the other one. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit too. We miss the lessons along the way. We miss the journey along the way. Sometimes these things like these jobs or something else that God has intended for us, sometimes they don't work out and sometimes they do. Sometimes we miss valuable time with God that we would have spent with him if we had not rushed. If we had not rushed past that situation where we could have talked about God to that cashier at the store or your friend in first period or your coworker in a cubicle. If we don't spend time with him, we'll never know when to stop. will never know when to take a break and when to take in that valuable time and those valuable opportunities to share his name. The second thing I want to see here is that he calls us to wait patiently. This is a big one right here. He calls us to wait patiently. It all boils down to this fact. We have to stop pushing for what we want when we want it. We have to stop sacrificing God's will for our own life and for what we want. We have to wait on him to work. Actually, I'm going to say that again because I don't think you understand the weight that is behind this. We have to stop sacrificing God's will for our own. We live in a selfish society that's based on what we want when we want it. You've heard me say it in countless episodes. We live in a selfish society that's dictated about what we want. But we cannot, and I repeat, we cannot we have to stop sacrificing God's will. We have to stop sacrificing what he wants in order to get what we want. Because in all honesty, that's never going to get you to the place where you need to go. It's never going to get you because you're not understanding what God's saying. You're not understanding what he wants for your life. You're not obeying him, first of all, and you're not being what we've called to be. We're not being with God. So we have to stop sacrificing God's will for our lives. We have to wait on him to work. And if you're anything like me, waiting is one of the least liked things. It's one of the least liked things in the human race because we hate waiting for anything. If you want to know a little fun fact, that's actually why fast food was invented. Because we don't like waiting. We like getting our food fast. We like drive-thrus. We like being able to go pay and get your food within like 4 or 5 minutes. We don't like waiting at a sit-down restaurant every single day, you know? Because we feel like waiting on something is a waste of time. It's a waste of time that takes 20, 40, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours out of our day that could be used for something productive. Yet whenever we say that, we tend to be the least productive. We also, this is a big one as well, we also feel as though it takes the control out of our hands. We feel as though it takes the control out of our hands. And I'm going to explain that here in a second. Waiting is something that I'm not very good at, okay? I've struggled with waiting my whole life, and that's because I really start to overthink when I wait. And that's the big one right here. So that's whenever it takes the control out of our hands, I start to overthink when I wait. It could be relationships, it could be championship games, it can be traffic, it can be job opportunities or anything else. They all lead me to overthink when I have to wait. I begin to think if that relationship is going to work out. Is the team going to win the game, or will we have to sit through another Chiefs Super Bowl? Am I going to get home in time if I'm stuck in traffic? Am I going to get to the job that I have if I'm stuck in traffic? Am I going to get the job that I so desire for, or that I've looked forward to? So overthinking plays a huge role in my ability to wait, just like it does everyone else's. Everyone struggles with a little bit of overthinking. And that's when we have to know who God is and what he does. That's when we have to know his character, who he is, where he's leading us, the speed limit that he's set forth for us. We have to understand that waiting is valuable. Waiting is valuable. And waiting comes easier when we know who is in control. When we know that God is in control, when we know who he is, what he's called us to, and how he works, it comes easier. Because when we are grasping for control and when we are putting it into our hands, there's a burden set forth on us. Therefore, it is harder to wait. We have a burden on us. But yet God takes away that burden, and he wants to take away that burden. All you have to do is let him. You have to give him control of your life and allow him to work in your life. And if you don't, most likely you're going to suffer from this overthinking. You're going to suffer from wanting to get places super fast, from wanting to go and 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 go. But waiting comes easier when we know who's in control. And since I've understood that, overthinking has been something of the past. I don't overthink about things anymore. Maybe the job opportunities because I'm still young in this ministry game, and I'm just very nervous about that. But still, it comes easier whenever we know who is in control. It's harder to wait whenever we have it in our own hands. We begin to get anxious and we overthink because that's what the human mind does in those situations. It's that simple. It's the human psyche. We do that because of the fact that we don't know what's next. Kind of like what we talked about with the detour last week. You're starting to understand that all of these episodes go together, aren't you? Just wait. Just wait till we get to the 8th one. Then it'll all, ooh. That's why I love this series so much. But anyway, it's also hard whenever it feels like nothing's going on. It's also hard to wait when it feels like nothing is going on, because in all reality, we are bored creatures. We get bored super easy. I know I do. Not as bad as I used to, but our mind has to be entertained. It always has to be entertained. That's a huge reason why we speed on the road, if I'm being completely honest with you. We want to get home because there's nothing on the road that'll satisfy us, at least in our minds. There's nothing that'll calm our minds and entertain us. Maybe music, maybe passing cars or whatever, but still, there's nothing really that can entertain us in the car. Unless we might have on a podcast, that might work, but still, we need entertaining. We start to see a period of waiting to get home, so we speed to get it over with. We don't want to be in that period of waiting. We want to be where we want to be, when we want to be there. We speed to get it over with. We do the same thing in our lives. We speed past those periods of waiting because we do not want to wait. We want to get what we want when we want it. We want to get where we want to go when we want to. That's a tongue twister right there. Oh my gosh. And this is when we have to change that. This is when we have to let God get what he wants when he wants and place us where he wants us when he wants us. Not when we want it, not where we want to go, but where God is leading us and when God is leading us. We are so desperate for control sometimes that we forget who is in control. It's that simple. We're so desperate for control that we forget who is in control. We have to change the fact of waiting. We have to be willing to wait in the seasons. The only real way to achieve that is through knowing what God wants. And that comes in those seasons. Knowing what God wants comes in those seasons of waiting and relying on him to show you where to go, to show you in those seasons of waiting where he wants you and what he wants you to do. And that means talking to him through prayer and through reading the Bible and through understanding his word and understanding his will for your life. If we are going to obey the speed limit, then we have to know the road we are on. I'm going to say that again. If you want to obey the speed limit, you have to know what road you're on. You have to know the road that God has set forth for you. You have to know the direction you are going. You have to know what God wants. You have to know why you're in that season of waiting. And the only way that happens, and the only way that you can obey that speed limit is through knowing God. It's through knowing what he wants. It's through knowing that you are in a season of waiting for a reason. Rely on God, obey him, become closer to him. Don't take the seasons of waiting for advantage. Don't take them for advantage because he knows what he's doing. Trust him and wait. Trust him and obey the speed limit. Because we have to know that there will be seasons of waiting and there will be traffic. But I promise you, the speed limit is what keeps us from veering off the path of God and onto our own. It's what keeps us from determining that, hey, our path is better than God's. It keeps us from taking that detour that we weren't supposed to take. It keeps us in the will of God. It keeps us in what he wants for us. We have to trust that he knows what he's doing because he does. He's our Father. He's the Creator. He knows exactly what He is doing, so trust Him. Waiting on God to work and act is one of the single most important things that you can do. And we have to understand that we are not in control of everything. We're not. We're not in control of anything, for being completely honest. As much as we wish we were, we're not. And waiting on God to act shows us that and reveals to us His plan. We just have to wait patiently. We have to stop looking at speed limits as a bad thing. In our day-to-day lives, speed limits prevent multiple fatalities and car wrecks. So we have to obey the speed limit. We have to slow down. We have to let God show us where He wants us, and we have to obey Him, and we have to understand that, hey, His will is better than mine. He wants to show us where He is leading us. We just have to let Him. We cannot take advantage of the road that God has placed before us or the scenery around us. We have to fully rely on Him and fully give Him control of our lives. And once we do that, we are able to appreciate the path that God has us on. Speed limit and all. But all of that starts with relinquishing control and obeying God. I'm going to give you all a little story real quick. I was in a crash on I-65 back in July, okay? I was going down to Florida. It was pouring down rain. I was going to Panama City. I was going faster than I was supposed to in the rain. And I was going over this small little bridge, and I hydroplaned. Turned sideways, overcorrected it, and I hit my back left tire on the concrete barrier of the bridge. I was swerving back and forth. Thank God that no cars were coming. Thank God that I was able to gain control of the car. I was able to pull over. I got to this Firestone in Hoover, Alabama, and they told me that my whole left axle rod was broken. My whole left wheel bearing was broken. That's a $1,000 mistake of speeding in the rain. $1,000 mistake. And it very well could have costed more than that. It could have costed my life. But the first thing, and this is important, the first thing I did whenever I got in that waiting room was resort to the Bible. I resorted to 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel, read the entire 2 books, got to read about David, got to read about why this psalm was written. I got to see where He wanted me to go. And the point of this story is this: when you go faster than what God wants you to go, it not only leads to surface damage, but it leads to internal or spiritual damage. It leads us to pull further and further away from Him. And during this time, I was trying to rush into a ministry position, and I fully believed that this was a wake-up call in my life to slow down. Not literally just on the roads, because I've been doing that too, but my spiritual life. Slow down and take in what I have for you. Slow down and take in what I have for you. And take in my reality rather than your own. Because if you don't, it'll lead to death. And since that day, I've tried my absolute hardest to slow down in everything that I do. And some days I want to go faster. But then I remember standing in the bathroom of that Firestone, crying and thanking God for telling me exactly that, to slow down. So stop trying to push the issue and start focusing on God's path. He loves you and He wants you to follow Him. So relinquish that control today and follow the speed limit that God has for you. Because I promise you, it leads you to God. Thank you guys for listening and watching, and we'll see you next week.